We say now the blessings before the study of Torah. Baruch hu et Adonai Hamvorach.
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach leolam va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach leolam va'ed. Baruch atah haya Eloheinu melech haolam. Asher bachar banu im kol ha'amim. V'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah haya Noten HaTorah.
Amen. I just muted myself. Shabbat Shalom. Welcome, everyone. Good to have you here. Nice to see your smiling faces. Thanks for joining us. Waving hands. Lovely to have you. So last week, for those of you who are here, we studied Parshat Beshalach, and we explored the continuing steps needed for our liberation. So we talked about the week before, we left, we put the lamb blood on our doorpost, and we walked through the gates, the womb perhaps, into our first steps, our physical acts for our liberation. And then we explored last week, we read through the Parsha, and we stopped as we went, and we explored what are the steps, additional steps needed to uplift liberation, to uplift not just the physical liberation, but to also acknowledge and uplift and explore what are the steps needed for our psycho-spiritual liberation. Because we know that we were in the desert for 40 years, and the generation that was born in slavery didn't get to make it into the promised land because they didn't actually achieve liberation. So we're continuing on this journey this week in Parshat Yitro, or Jethro, which is, Yitro is Moses' father-in-law, and he brings Moses' wife and his sons into the wilderness to join them in their journey, in their liberation journey, if you will, in their journey to the promised land, which for me would be the land of liberation, both individual liberation and collective liberation. And so in this parsha, you'll see, we're going to read it in a moment, Yitro advises Moses about how to set up a judicial, not really a judicial system, a system to listen to disputes. Yeah, I guess you could call it a judicial system. We'll talk about that when we get there. And then we hear the 10 speech acts, commonly referred to as the 10 commandments, and we will compare the traditional speech acts that are in the Torah with ones that I've rewritten, and we'll discuss those. And I just want to highlight a few things before we continue with the reading. So last week, the last step of last week's parsha in our liberation journey was the story of Amalek. And Amalek was the enemy who attacked the Israelites, and it was a particularly savage and heartless assault, and it was undeterred by God. And Amalek surprised Israel when it was famished and weary, and cut down all the stragglers in the rear. In other words, it targeted the most vulnerable. And as I mentioned last week, there were two things about this. One was that I reminded folks who weren't aware or didn't remember that Netanyahu referred to Hamas as Amalek. And I said that part of our liberation struggle is to recognize that we need to overcome our trauma so that we don't see all people, all others, as Amalek. And also so that we don't end up embodying the Amalek within us. So as I was rereading this and rethinking about this and looking at this description of Amalek being particularly savage, a heartless assault, undeterred by God, surprised Israel when famished and weary and cut down all the stragglers, targeting the most vulnerable, I couldn't help but think about the ways in which Israel has embodied Amalek vis-a-vis Gaza today. And so we can see that as a people, we're still very much stuck in Amalek, the internalized Amalek, and also the externalized projection that the other is Amalek. So that's the first thing I just wanted to bring to light today. The next thing I wanted to bring to light is that you'll see when we read this, we ended with the story Amalek, and we begin with the story of Yitro, or Jethro, before we get to Mount Sinai. And there's this contrast between Amalek, the voice of war and violence, and Yitro, Jethro, the voice of shalom and peace. And those are the words that are used. And this contrast happens before we actually get to Mount Sinai, before we actually hear the first rendition of the 10 speech acts. And so I was wondering, why is it that we have this piece before we get to Mount Sinai? And one of the things that I thought about was that in order to receive this divine revelation, we could say it's perhaps a divine revolution as well, but before we receive this divine revelation that we're going to download from the divine in the 10 speech acts, we need to be in a place of peace and shalom, in wholeness. Because if we approach divine revelation, if we hear divine revelation from a place of fear, from a place of constriction, then we will hear fear in the divine revelation. We will hear constriction. We will hear domination. We will not hear an expansive vision. We will not hear love and kindness. The manifestation of the voice that we will hear is dependent upon the world in which we embody in that moment. And so if we had approached Mount Sinai from a place of fear of the other, then the revelation would have possibly been very, very different. And so as we engage in this continued journey, I want to say that it's important that we journey not because we're running away, not merely to run away from something, but to move towards a vision of love and kindness and generosity. So as we read this parsha, hold that, and we're going to do a bit of what we did last time, which is I'm going to jump in and ask some questions and share some thoughts and reflections, and then we'll get to the 10 speech acts, and you'll see Austin's created this beautiful slides with both on the same slide. So we will jump right in now. And welcome to those who just joined us. Would somebody be willing to start reading?
Hi, I'm going to try.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Jethro, priest of Midian, Moses' father-in-law, heard of that Tetragrammaton had done, or should I say God? Am I allowed to say that?
You can say God or Yud He Vav He. You could say Yud He Vav He.
Okay. Heard that God had done the Moses of Israel, God's people. How is that Jehovah?
That's Yud He Vav He. Yud He Vav He.
Had brought Israel out of Egypt. So Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, took Zipporah, Moses' wife, after she had been sent home. And her two sons, whom one was named Gershom, that is to say, I have been a stranger in a foreign land. And others was named Eliziah, meaning the God of my father house was my help, delivering me from the sword of Pariah. Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, brought Moses, son and wife, to him in the wilderness, where he was encamped at the mountain of God. He sent word to Moses, I, your father in Jethro, am coming to you with your wife and her two sons. Moses went out to meet the father-in-law. He bowed low and kissed him. Each asked after the other's welfare, and they went into the tent. Moses then recounted to his father-in-law everything that Yevavave or Jehovah had done to Pariah and the Egyptians.
Pharaoh
Pharaoh and the Egyptians for Israel's sake. All the hardship that had befallen them on the way, and how Yevavave had delivered them. And Jethro rejoiced over the kindness of Yevavave had shown Israel when delivering from the Egyptians. Blessed be Yevavave, Jethro said, who delivered you from the Egyptians and from Pariah, and who delivered the people from under the hand of the Egyptians. Now that Yevavave is greater than all gods, yes, by the result of their very schemes against the people. To Jethro, Moses, to Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, brought a burnt offering and sacrifices for God. And Aaron came with the elders of Israel to partake of the meal before God with Moses' father-in-law. Next day, Moses sat as magistrate among the people, while the people stood about Moses from morning until evening. But when Moses' father-in-law saw how much he had to do for the people, he said, "What is this thing that you are doing to the people? Why do you act alone while all the people stand about you from morning until evening?" Moses replied to his father-in-law, "It is because the people come to me to inquire of God, about God. When they have a dispute, it comes before me, and I decide between one party and another, and I make known the laws of the teachings of God." But Moses' father-in-law said to him, "The thing you are doing is not right. You will surely wear yourself out, and these people as well, for the task is too heavy for you. You cannot do it alone. Now listen to me. I will give you counsel, and God be with you. You represent the people before God. You bring the disputes before God, and enjoin upon them the laws and the teachings, and make known to them the way they are to go and the practices they are to follow. You shall seek out from among the people capable individuals who fear God, trustworthy ones who spurn ill-gotten gain. Set these over them as chiefs of thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens, and let the judge of peoples at all times. Let them judge people at all times. Have them bring every major dispute to you, but let them decide every minor dispute themselves. Make it easier for yourself by letting them share the burden with you. If you do this, and God so commands you, you will be able to bear up, and all these people will go home unwearied." Moses heeded his father-in-law and did just as he said. Moses chose capable individuals out of all Israel and appointed them heads over the people, chiefs of thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. And they judged the people at all times, the difficult matter they would bring to Moses, and all the minor matters that would be decided themselves. Then Moses bade his father-in-law farewell, and he went his way to his own land.
Okay,
19.
let's pause there. Pause there, please. Thank you. Pause there for a moment and talk about this part of this parsha. So this is the part of the parsha, as you can see, where Yitro, or Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, who's not an Israelite, comes and tells Moses how to create a judicial system. So if we think about continuing on our journey of liberation, perhaps one of the things that we're hearing here is that you need to set up a system of justice. What are your thoughts about the particular? We could stop the screen sharing for a moment, Austin. I appreciate it. Thank you. What are some of the reflections or thoughts you have about the system of justice? And Heidi, I see your question, so we can address that in this conversation too. So that's my first question for you. He tells Moses, you shouldn't be the judge of everything. You need to distribute justice decision making. So what do we think about the system that Yitro suggests to Moses and that Moses then sets up? Luca and then Heidi. That's just the order I saw your hands. Luca, would you like to unmute?
Oh no, I didn't have anything to say.
Oh,
Sorry.
that's okay. Okay, Heidi?
Well, I guess what struck me was not so much the distribution of who judges, although that was there. What struck me was to articulate the laws and the rules so that everybody knows what fairness is and it's transparent.
Mm.
And then with that in place, then you can distribute the distribution of justice. Because if it's not clear that we all are agreeing on the same code, then it would allow all those different minor judges to do their own thing. If, on the other hand, we're united in a common value system and legal system and prevention system, then the distribution can be fair and equitable.
Interesting. Beautiful. Thank you.
Can I add to Heidi's idea?
Yeah, please.
Okay, I'm just wondering, it raises a lot of questions for me. I certainly agree that we have to agree on a code. I would frame it as a structure. And then we have to think about how different people get benefits and different people are burdened by whatever it is we've agreed on, and probably continue to readjust. So it has to be a kind of living document of justice. It can't be just set in stone, if you will. That's it.
Beautiful. Thank you. Others?
I like the way they allow the smaller things to be dealt with the people, outside of being judgment. I recently, just this week, have had a mental overload where I just almost melted my brain. So this particular sermon hits home because I had to take a couple of days to recover from all the learning, all the information I imprinted in my head. So, and I'm just curious about the numbers, why 50, 20, 10. I'll have to go back into that to understand the increments of the breakdown of the, that could be a cipher in itself. So anyway, but thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah, so the way I read it is that the people aren't deciding it, but that, I mean, it's being distributed down and down, but there are ultimately judges who are making those decisions. Okay, other thoughts? So those of you who are putting in the chat, do you want me to read out loud what you're putting in the chat? Carol, go ahead.
Oh, me?
Yeah, you unmuted.
No, go ahead and then I'll go.
Okay. So Naomi writes, nothing is perfect. Someone not directly involved might not see the whole dynamics of a situation. Someone close to a given situation might have their own axe to grind. And Alchemy writes, first thought was that he's right. Even though it's not for disability, it normalizes accessibility in a way you don't have the strength to do all this. And it benefits everyone to come up with less exhausting methods and share the responsibility. Great. It's great, too, that Moses listens to the criticism and idea even with his status and his father-in-law's status. Something I was concerned about is how do they know what's big and small? What happens if someone lower down doesn't want to give up the power and ask a higher up? If we did this again, how would we know who was good to put at the top? And then Rochelle says justice and fairness. So let me just, some reflections on Alchemy's comments and questions. Thank you. So one of the things that the rabbis and others talk about is what's interesting about this is Yitro is not an Israelite. So we're receiving some information and guidance about how to create a just community or how to enact justice by a non-Israelite, which is a very interesting thing in our Torah. And this happens in many places in the Torah where non-Israelites, non-Jews play significant roles in the histories and unfolding of our peoples. And here's the first time we really see that. So that's really powerful to think about. And yes, they're saying Moses doesn't have the strength to do this. And it parallels what happens in the story of Amalek, where he has to hold up his hands and then they win the battle. And if his hands go down, they lose the battle. And then people come and hold his arms up because he doesn't have the strength. And so Yitro is basically saying the same thing here. You don't have the strength to hold it all yourself. You have to share power. So there's more I want to say, but I want to hear from other folks. So Carol, please.
Yeah, I'm not clear. I thought I heard you saying earlier that the 10 Commandments are coming. So if the 10 Commandments have not been articulated yet, on what basis are the judges deciding on the laws of God if we haven't been given them yet?
It's a beautiful question. It's a question that the rabbis definitely grapple with.
Oh, I'm glad.
Yeah. And I mean, there's also the argument that like everything's happening at the same time in the Torah. There's no timeline, there's no beginning and end. So there's that element of it. I mean, we're told that Abraham knew the whole Torah, which was in the story of Genesis. And that he was following all the laws. So, but that's a really good question. What's being enacted here if we're not following some God-given Ten Commandments? And, I like to think about it as, well, people are living in a desert. Fights are inevitably going to erupt. And so things had to be resolved in that context. Carol, you're muted again, so please.
But how if we don't know what the laws of God are? I mean, once you start delegating, God hasn't, in theory, has only spoken to Moses or maybe a few select people so far, or
Right.
how are these people with the thousands and hundreds and fifty? What have the rabbis in their wisdom?
Yeah, so that's why the question becomes, how come this is before the Ten Commandments? And so it comes later. We're going to get that in a minute. What is it that they're enacting? What is the judgments and justice that they're enacting? And we're going to get that in a minute. Or in a couple minutes.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, Philip.
Hi. So I wanted to, jump a few centuries into the future and contrast this model of judges, appointed judges, not elected judges, appointed judges, making these decisions, and contrast that with a much more recent model that the Tikkun community has talked about at length over some time now, and that is restorative justice, in which decision making and resolution finding is a much more collective activity, right, involving not only the two parties, but a number of other sort of concerned members of the community to weigh in and deliberate and get a sort of a bigger picture of perhaps the dispute between the two, and its maybe its roots in community sources and relations and so on. It's a larger frame of understanding and of solving these kinds of problems that frankly appeals to me, as and I was a criminal defense lawyer most of my life, and I was appearing before judges who handed out sentences all the time. But I just often wonder, are they wise enough to come up with better decisions than a collective of community people involved and with knowledge and much larger experience than a single judge would have to come up with a good solution? So that's just a question I want to put out there.
Amen. That was one of my comments that I wanted to raise, which was this is definitely a hierarchical system of justice, and really it's kind of based on efficiency. Right? Like Moses, you don't have the time, you don't have the energy to do all this. It's not really based on what is justice, how do we enact justice, what does justice even mean, how do we figure that out as a community. So yes, it is definitely a hierarchical justice system, and it's men meting out justice on other people for them, rather than creating a restorative, community-grounded justice system. So thank you for raising that, Philip. And Heidi, your question, which I'm going to find in a second, is this before we thought of God as one, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh is the greatest among the gods. So this appears throughout the story of Exodus, right? Like Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh is going to harden Pharaoh's heart so that Pharaoh will know that Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh is the greatest God, and it happens again and again and again. And this is part of that voice in the Torah that speaks to the voice of the battles between the gods of the time. So the journey of the Israelite people into monotheism develops throughout ancient times. And this is manifest here, where there's moments of, yes, this is the greatest God. And then there's moments of, but what about these other gods? I want to prove I'm a better God. And it's that tension that's manifesting that you see throughout. You really see it in the Exodus, story of Exodus, with the plagues, and I'm going to show them how great I am, and they're going to believe me, and that's just the power over dominant voice of the divine speaking through the human beings that wrote that part of the Torah. So I hope that answers. I think that, I would say that there's probably still many of us who grapple with monotheism in the way that it's articulated in the Torah of one divine being above us, meting out rewards and punishment. And that is certainly not a manifestation of the divine that I connect with, although at times I wish it was. I wish there was such a good, loving, divine source that could mete out righteousness and justice in ways that were actually aligned with righteousness and justice. But that's not how it seems to play out. Does that address that question, Heidi? Great. Andre.
So does justice only come from God, or is it a shared blessing? And if so, then what are the sources of it? And then do those we anoint to mete it out, do they claim to speak for God? I mean, how have the rabbi scholars thought about that?
Well, the ancient rabbis, I would say, were quite comfortable with this concept of this hierarchical justice system. Then as time has evolved and people have a deeper understanding of restorative justice, then there's more modern day critiques and questions about the very questions you're asking. What does justice look like? What does it mean? How do we enact it? So that would be my answer to that question. Anyone else?
Hi. I was under the impression that the apex, the idea of one God is the apex in the triangle, the cornerstone or the apex of everyone else that moves to that point where the Messiah is one. Do you know anything about that at all?
You want to jump in?
Well,
That's a bigger.
yeah, I mean, jump in on the other things that were talked about. So,
Whatever you want, Michael.
yeah, so I'd like to say that there was a lot of discussion about all this in the Talmud, and and over again, after long debates about the issues, and what is, and it went from the smallest possible issue to the hugest possible issues, and very often the answer at the end of that discussion, which went for many pages of Talmud, was, you know what, when this will be decided when the return of the what
the Messiah
of the Messiah is there to. So until then, we respect both sides. Neither side has the absolute truth about what is appropriate, what is the way of understanding what is good to do. We keep alive both or many sides, and that is one of the things that's so amazing about our tradition. And so I wish it was alive today, so that people wouldn't go deciding either, oh yeah, the best thing to do is kill all the people of the what's the name of them again? Of
The Palestinians?
yeah, of the Palestinian people, we're going to wipe them out. Versus the other side saying, no, 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 no. Now, I know what side I'm on that one, on the no side, but but the debate would at least make it possible for the Jewish world to say, well, let's stop this conversation. We don't know which side is right, and good time for a relax of an opening for us to just sit and talk rather than for us to kill.
Stop the violence and have a ceasefire so that we can figure out a different path, which is what we've been saying from day one of this, from October 7th, is to pause and engage in a discussion and reflection, and also mourning and grieving before we determine the best path forward.
Right.
So, okay.
Yes.
Good. Great.
Thank you, Rabbi Lerner. Nice to talk to you. Thank you, sir, for your insight. Thank you. Thank you, Rabbi Kat.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I appreciate that too. And I want to connect it to what Kat said, if there's time. Kat mentioned early on that there is a connection, that there is one drash, I guess, one interpretation that argues that when the question was raised about the 10 speech acts or commandments, whether or not this is a linear presentation of justice or not. If we go into the space of the nonlinear and we say that all knowledge is always there and present, a different way to think about time and the way that Torah unfolds, then we can connect. We can say that there are seeds in what Rabbi Lerner has just said, even in this terrible moment that we're living through. And that it's upon us, I think, as people who want to see justice as mediating conflict, as mediating the way others who take sides see how benefits and burdens have to go into their favor, the benefits. Then I think we're probably on the right path, because I think short of the Messiah, the Mashiach, I mean, that's basically, it's a very imperfect world. It always has been, but there are the seeds to see to bring this all forward in a better way. That's it.
And may it be so. Luca, your hand, I don't know if you still wanted to add something. Please go for it.
Thank you. I was gonna say I really appreciate in the Parsha how Yitro tells Moses to not only that Moses can't handle doing everything himself, but also that the people will get worn out if Moses did it all himself, because it would be tiring to go to the same guy all the time being like, oh, I have this problem, can you take it up with God? But also how do I explain this? It's like, as opposed to Moses taking it up to Moses and Moses takes it up to God, rather we take it up ourselves and kind of take it upon ourselves to be righteous and pursue justice as much as we can. And since we are all B'Tselem Elohim, made in the image of God, I think we can do it if we really try.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you. Okay, are we ready to continue with now the rest of the Parsha? Yes. Okay, so we're going to read up to the speech acts, and then we'll switch to the two side by side. So somebody else want to unmute and read here.
On the third new moon, after the Israelites had gone forth from the land of Egypt, on that very day they entered the wilderness of Sinai. Having journeyed from Rephidim, they entered the wilderness of Sinai and encamped in the wilderness. Israel encamped there in front of the mountain, and Moses went up to God. Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh called to him from the mountain, saying, "Thus shall you say to the house of Jacob and declare to the children of Israel, you have seen what I did to the Egyptians, how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to me. Now then, If you will obey me faithfully and keep my covenant, you shall be my treasured possessions among all the peoples. Indeed, all the earth is mine, but you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words that you shall speak to the children of Israel.
I'm going to jump in for one moment here. If you could scroll back up, Alden, for a second. Austin, thank you. Indeed, all the earth is mine. And that gets repeated later, but I just want to highlight that for a moment, because what's happening right now is we're fighting over land and we're killing people over land. It's what we've been doing, all peoples have been doing forever. But here's a really powerful reminder right here. All the earth is the divine, and you shall be a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. But the land itself, don't idolize that. It's just land. Keep going, Carol, thanks.
Start with Moses came and summoned the elders of the people and put before them all that Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh had commanded him. All those assembled answered as one, saying, all that Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh has spoken, we will do. And Moses brought back the people's words to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. And Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh said to Moses, I will come to you in a thick cloud in order that the people may hear when I speak with you and so trust you ever after. Then Moses reported the people's words to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, and Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh said to Moses, go to the people and warn them to stay pure today and tomorrow. Let them wash their clothes. Let them be ready for the third day. For on the third day, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh will come down in the sight of all the people on Mount Sinai. You shall set bounds for the people round about, saying, beware of going up the mountain or touching the border of it. Whoever touches the mountain shall be put to death without being touched by being either stoned or shot. Beast or person, a trespasser shall not live. When the ram's horn sounds a long blast, they may go up on the mountain. Moses came down from the mountain to the people and warned the people to stay pure, and they washed their clothes. And he said to the people, be ready for the third day. The men among you should not go near a woman.
Okay, pause. God never said that.
Good.
God, God's saying, I'm going to appear to you in this great thunder and lightning and this great cloud, and the people will know you're hearing God's words, and then they'll trust your words. And then Moses makes up his own story. Men shall not go near women. God, that is not in what God told Moses. So just think that's interesting that Moses already is taking on his own language and words, or the editors are giving Moses his own language and words.
What are all the, okay, on the third day, as the morning dawned, there was thunder and lightning and a dense cloud upon the mountain and a very loud blast of the horn, and all the people who were in the camp trembled. Moses led the people out of the camp toward God, and they took their places at the foot of the mountain. Now Mount Sinai was all in smoke, for Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh had come down upon it in fire. Smoke rose like the smoke of a kiln, and the whole mountain trembled violently. The blare of the horn grew louder and louder. As Moses spoke, God answered him in thunder. Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh came down upon Mount Sinai and on the top of the mountain, and Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh called Moses to the top of the mountain, and Moses went up. Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh said to Moses, go down, warn the people not to break through to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh to gaze, lest many of them perish. The priests also who come near Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh must stay pure, lest Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh break out against them. But Moses said to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, the people cannot come up to Mount Sinai, for you warned us, set bounds upon the mountains and sanctify it. So Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh said, stop arguing with him. Said to him, stop, go down and come back together with Aaron, but let not the priests or the people break through to come up to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, lest God break out against them. And Moses went down to the people and spoke to them. Keep going. God spoke.
Just this first
God
sentence.
spoke all these words, saying.
Okay, so we're going to pause here and we're going to switch the slides so we can see them side by side. And so, Carol, I'll ask you to read the first one. Austin's just getting the slide deck up, and then maybe someone
I
will
don't
read.
see it. I just see the.
It's not up yet. Yeah, it's not up
Oh.
yet. It takes him a moment to switch from the Torah to the slide deck. So here we go. So if you'll read the left one first, and then we'll read mine, and we'll go through all of them, and then we'll have some discussion. But actually, go ahead.
No, to both sides?
Yes.
I am Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. I, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. I'm your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, the house of bondage.
So that's the one that was in the Torah. So now you can read.
Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh is your God. Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh is the transformative power of the universe that brought you out of the narrow consciousness of slavery and constriction. All life is a manifestation of the divine. Transformative liberation is always possible. You shall have no other gods besides me.
This is the
This is
the second commandment. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, you shall not make for yourself a sculptured image or any likeness of what is in the heavens above or on the earth below or in the waters under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or serve them. For I, your God, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, am an impassioned God, visiting the guilt of the parents upon the children, upon the third and the fourth generations of those who reject me, but showing kindness to the thousandth generation of those who keep my commandments. And the divine is unknowable. Do not get distracted by or honor the idols of your time. Do not bow down to or attach yourself to those idols, because if you do, you will see the world in a static way rather than recognizing the possibility of possibilities that lives within all life forms. Do not sculpt any image in the likeness of the divine, because there is nothing in the universe that compares to the amazing unfolding of the cosmic consciousness. There are some things that are just unknowable beyond imagination.
So I'm going to pause us here for a moment. So as we talked about the journey of liberation, and now we're receiving these divine downloads. So, imagine that there's like thunder and lightning and crazy dramatic nature scenes happening, and these are being downloaded to a people. And they're being downloaded both to the individuals and to the whole collective of the people. And we're told that anyone who is Jewish or identifies as Jewish was there at the time. We were all there at this time receiving this download. And so the first one is, one thing we need on our liberation journey is to know that there's some divine source in the universe that makes possible the transformation from that which is to that which ought to be and can be. So that's part of our, that's hard to hold on to. Just that in of itself. And then if you could go back one slide, Austin, I appreciate it, to the second one. Thank you. So this is the first one. And then the second one, the divine, thank you. The divine is unknowable. We can't hold on to the fact that it's really hard to define or contain something as vast and magnificent and wild as a divine source of the universe. Can we hold on to the possibility that things are just unknowable and beyond imagination? Okay, let's go on to the third one.
You shall not swear falsely by the name of your God, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, for Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh will not clear one who swears falsely by God's name.
Will not relieve them of guilt.
Okay. Respect diverse beliefs. Be respectful of the spiritual and religious beliefs and practices of others that preach love and respect for the other. Honor that there are many paths to the divine. Recognize that Jews are not better than others, and our path is only one of many ways that people have heard the universe speak to them.
So here again, and it's interesting, this shows up in the Parshat Yitro, where we honor a non-Jew who's teaching us about maybe some limited forms of justice, but still teaching us a form of justice. And so here we are saying, don't bow down, don't swear to false gods, but also recognize that there are different paths to connection with divine source.
You shall not swear false. Oh,
No,
you shall not swear.
Yeah, this one, Sabbath.
Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of your God, Yud He Vav He. You shall not do any work. You, your son or daughter, your male or female, but not your wife. You, your male or female servant, or your cattle, or the strange. I'm sorry, that's kind of striking. Your cattle, or the stranger who is within your settlements. For in 6 days Yud He Vav He made heaven and earth and sea, and all that is in them, and then rested on the seventh day. Therefore, Yud He Vav He blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it.
So you could read that as saying that Yud He Vav He is in that case is speaking to all the people, and so he's also speaking to the women and to the wives because they're all there. So I agree with you. I read it the way you do too, but we could also read it as it's being spoken to all the people, so the women and the men.
Okay. Safeguard Shabbat. Shabbat is a precious time for you to connect with what is awe-inspiring and sacred in your life and in the world. 6 days you shall work. The seventh day is a holy day for joy and wonder. You, everyone in your home, and anyone who works for you should be free to enjoy the precious time off and be treated with honor and dignity. Have compassion and empathy for yourself and others. Remember, you were once slaves, and in partnership with the transformative power you obtained liberation. Remember to protect and struggle for the freedom of others.
So another part of our liberation journey is to remember to take time to re-nourish ourselves, rest, and re-ensoul ourselves.
Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy.
Wait, hold on. Next slide. Sorry.
Honor your father and mother, that you may long endure on the land that your God, Yud He Vav He, is assigning you. Honor your father and mother. Recognize and honor where you came from. Aging is a challenging process, particularly in a society that idolizes youth and fails to provide adequate care for the elderly. Care for and support of your parents as best you are able. All people are perfectly imperfect, including those who raised you. Forgive them while also respecting your needs for safety and security.
So honoring our aunt, I would say this more broadly. Let's say honoring where we came from, honoring our ancestors, honoring our traditions, honoring our elders, and also making sure that you can take care of yourself and protect yourself from harm.
You shall not murder. Recognize the sanctity of all life. Speak out against and resist all actions that desecrate life, whether committed by individuals, communities, governments, or due to social systems and structures of oppression and exploitation.
So this is a more comprehensive, right? Like, we shall not murder. I want to say, like, we need to recognize the sanctity of all life and stand up in honor of that and speak out for that.
You shall not commit adultery. Be honest in your words and actions. Honor the sanctity of diverse sexual expression and relationships. Be impeccable in your words and actions in your sexual relationship with others. Build committed relationships.
Yeah. So remember, our words matter. How we speak to others, what relationships we engage in.
You shall not you shall not steal. Respect people and the planet. Pay what things actually cost in living wages and planetary resources. Share your resources with others. Given the unjust distribution of the world's resources, practice generosity and advocate for equitable and sustainable distribution of the world's resources.
Yeah, so that's sorry, Austin, I keep jumping in and so that's right? Do you see how I'm trying to put these into a more positive vision of what it means to not steal? It means really thinking about how do we respect people on the planet and hold ourselves accountable for that in ways that our society does not require us to do so.
Mhm.
Now we can go to the next slide. Thank you.
You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. Be honest. Speak and demand truth in all spheres, home, corporations, and government. Live in integrity. Avoid speaking about others. Let them tell their own stories and speak for themselves. Wow.
Yep. That's a good one, huh?
You shall not cover your neighbor's house. You shall not cover your neighbor's wife or husband, or male or female servant, or ox or ass, or anything else that is your neighbor's. Practice and know enoughness. Ethically and consciously consume, being aware that we live on a finite planet that cannot sustain consumption of the world's resources, excessive consumption of the world's resources. Recognize that you have enough, you are enough, and that we could build a world where there is enough for everyone.
I mean,
How hard is it for us to land into where we practice and know that we are enough, that we have enough, and that there is enough? Next, yeah, go ahead, next slide. Thank you, Austin.
I think this is the one I already read.
Yeah, we're waiting for the next slide.
Yeah, there are no more slides. This is the
Oh,
last
that
slide.
is the last one. Okay, that's what I thought. I thought I saw you jump ahead. Thank you. Okay, so we can stop the slides for a moment. So, okay, so that was a lot of contrast, compare and contrast. And I'm just checking our time to see if we have time to go into breakout rooms. So, Austin, are you able to set up breakout rooms for folks to discuss these first in breakout rooms, and then we'll come back and get some reflections and sharing from there? So you're going to go into breakout rooms for, we'll say, what do we, like 12, 15 minutes? That should be plenty of time. And I just invite you, each of you, to pick one that's challenging for you or that speaks to you, and share your reflections and thoughts with each other. And each person can choose a different one. What is it? Which one of these do you really resonate with? Which one's challenging for you? And how do you engage with them in this world today that we're in? So that's what we're going to do in breakout rooms for about 12 to 15 minutes, and we'll come back and discuss them collectively. Okay? Great. Welcome back. I love seeing people's faces. People are still coming back, I think. Yep. There we go. Now you're bumped out. Now you have no choice. You're probably having rich. Okay. Now people have their videos on too. That's delightful. Any any reflections or sharings or questions that folks want to bring to the group as a whole?
Hi.
Hi.
Okay, so I'm with Joyce and Nikki, and they asked me to be the representative. So our question is, the first question is, should we be taking everything literally? How should we interpret the Ten Commandments? Should it be a literal interpretation?
Well,
I think that's what I got out of
what
it.
would a literal interpretation mean and not mean?
Well, thou shalt not murder came up,
Mhm.
and someone said something. I don't want to say this is kind of harsh, but someone said that possibly Moses was a murderer, or Moses murdered. Is that true?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
That
So
is true.
what came from that was that we're somewhat false. You know, we have our problems. You know what I'm saying? So I guess Moses did this sin before the Ten Commandments was produced on the Mount Sinai, the volcano. Should we be taking it literally? How should we be interpreting the Ten Commandments? I guess that was the question.
So do folks want to, I don't want to jump in yet. I want to open it up for discussion. It's an interesting
Thank
question.
you. Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you. Ami, yeah.
Yeah, just I think the commandment in the speech act in Hebrew is "do not murder," as opposed to "do not kill." Neither of which, of course, is palatable, but it's important. Yeah,
Yeah.
just to point that out.
Yeah, I think that is what it said on the screen and what he said.
Right.
Yeah, do not murder.
It says "do not kill." Right.
Yeah. So, Jacqueline.
So talked about how the events in Israel and Palestine our sense of what the Ten Commandments should be, and they are not being followed. And I would add, which I didn't raise this, but I would add that it's just sickening that the people in Israel who claim to be the most observant, the most Torah Jews, are the ones who are doing the murdering and the massacring, stealing of land.
Amen. Yep. There's images on the internet, and I guess they've been TikTok videos of soldiers like praying as they're right before they're shooting off bombs, or reading the Torah with using a sword as the pointer on the Torah, and like you can just imagine the sword, like I just kind of picture it like slicing through the words of Torah. So yeah,
dancing,
right, and dancing. And I was just speaking to a friend yesterday who she knows folks who are going to Israel in solidarity, and then they're having these parties like these, and they're dancing while bombs, while slaughtering and genocide is happening in Gaza. It's really, I mean, I don't know, as I get that image of that sword on the Torah, it almost makes me feel like, yeah, that's exactly what's happening. It's just being shredded. Yeah, horrifying. Neil, please. Thank you, Jacqueline.
We know later on that theologically, the cosmic reason for Israel being expelled from the land was causeless hatred. There's a difference between legitimate defense, as in Moses, yes, he killed the Egyptian overseer who was without mercy, beating one of the oppressed servants, and he was filled with righteous indignation, which later transformed into a liberatory consciousness. But the kind of things that are going on in Israel, clearly, this is not about safety. This is not about stability. It comes from just some really vile, uncooked, emotional traumas that are being projected onto the Palestinians. And as such, there's nothing that makes this okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Other thoughts? There's still the question of, yeah, Carol, and there's still the question of literal, which I'll address in a couple minutes, but just want to see.
Oh, no, this is the next group report. Why don't you address the literal before I give a different group report?
Okay. My, when I think of divine revelation, I think about what, like there's times when I pray and I'm seeking a divine inspiration or revelation. And then it comes into each of us. It lands in each individual as individuals, and then ideally as a collective community. And so I think, how we interpret it and how we embody it and live it in our lives depends on where we are on our own liberation, psycho-spiritual journey of wholeness and healing. So, Carol, I'm just going to mute you for one moment. So, whether we take it literally or not, I think it depends on how we each read it and understand it. But certainly for me, like, do not murder is an easy one. Yes, I would take that quite literally. And so that's part of why I rewrote them into this more positive language, is so that we could massage them, if you will, into being more real. And so I want to encourage you to create your own that you could try to live by. And maybe, you do one a week or one a month until you can really feel into how you can live out this particular manifestation of that particular speech act, whether it's the do not murder or whether it's honoring your mother and father. Lots of us have very, very complicated, difficult relationships with our parents. So how do we, or I usually call that one honor where we came from, or honor our ancestors. Actually, wrote. Want to think about how do we do that if we have really complicated relationships with our ancestors or our parents. And that's why I said also respect your boundaries. And in fact, the Talmud, the conversations about that particular one about honoring your mother and father has a long discussion about what that means. What if they tell you to lie? What if they tell you to violate a commandment? What if they tell you to not follow the divine? All these things, they discuss it. And they're like, no, well, you don't have, if your parent tells you to violate the commandments, don't do that. That's not honoring your parents. So honoring and so there's lots of discussion. So that's what I would say about the literal. Carol, please.
So is it okay to give a different group report now?
Please.
Yeah, so we discussed two big things. One was, I'm going to do it the second thing first. One was that a couple of us, at least out of the four of us, agreed that despite your remonstrance that wasn't the case, that we felt that it really was, that the speech acts, the commandments were speaking to the men, that the men were the representatives of the community, and it tells them that they should have the day off for Shabbat, and tell your servants and your children, but it doesn't say anything about the women folk. And the same was true of the adultery. Don't covet your neighbor's wife, but it didn't say anything about women having any desire. So there was that. And then the thing that we spent a lot of time, which meant it was off-putting in general, was like, was this being addressed to us too? Or are we, second class, whatever. But then the other thing we talked a lot about was our relationship with the natural world, the plant world, the things that we think of as its, but if we thought of them as beings, as things that we're in more direct relationship with, we wouldn't be so likely to take more than we need, that we wouldn't take the first or the last, that we would, never take more than half. The whole way we overconsume and eat and acquire more than we need is just poisonous to us. And
yeah.
Beautiful,
thank you. Yeah, that's why I changed the do not murder to honor the sanctity of all life, so that we're in relationship with creation itself, which really is, in Genesis, really is what we're doing. We're supposed to be in relationship with all of creation. And if we're in relationship with creation, we're honoring all of creation, it will flourish and there will be enough. But if we overconsume and overtake, and we don't think there's enough, then we will have the world that we have. So, and also, I'm just putting in chat to a Judith Plaskow book, perhaps you know it, Standing Again at Mount Sinai, which is a feminist rendition, or it's not a rewriting of the story. It's a feminist engagement, I would say, with what you're speaking to around women not being there or not being seen. And so she says, we were there. So it's a great book. Others? Other reflections or thoughts?
Oh, hi again.
Hi
I
again.
you just brought up something. Thank you so much for that, Judith Plaskow. That's as being a male who is without a family or children. Sometimes I don't understand, about the offspring, the process of husband and wife and offspring. That's another thing that came up. I believe it was from Nikki or Joyce. What of the children? The children aren't recognized. We thank the mother and the father, but we don't thank the children. Thank you.
It talks about harms that you commit will be carried on for thousands of generations, for 3 or 4 generations, and goodness will be carried on for thousands of generations. So I gotta let my dog in. Jody, come over here. Thank you. Okay. And Austin,
Wait, I have a question about the thousands,
one second.
because
Go ahead.
doesn't it say unto the thousandth generation, and then what happens? We're past that now, so how does that apply to us?
It means every generation, the 1000th generation from every generation. It just keeps going. So from our generation, our goodness is carried out for thousands of generations, and our harm is carried out for 3 or 4 generations.
Thank you.
Yeah, it just keeps going. I just want to let everyone know that Austin, thank you, Austin, put in the chat the link on Goodreads to the book that I mentioned by Judith Plaskow, so you can grab the link from there and order it through a independent bookstore if you want. Other reflections or thoughts from folks? What did you find? There were some questions in the chat or comments about murdering using not just our hands, but also planes or bombs, and also what do we steal beyond money or stuff? Time, reputation, opportunity. So did other folks have other discussions about any of the particular speech acts? I call them speech Adibrot. Anyone?
Hi.
Yeah, Luca, please.
I was just gonna say the one that really resonated with me, or the one that kind of interested me the most, was honor where you came from, or honor your father and mother, depending on how you choose to interpret it.
Yeah.
Because I personally converted to Judaism, so I have both my parents are Protestant, but not only are they Protestant, they are also Mexican. So they don't really do any of the traditional Mexican things that you would think of, like Dia de los Muertos, for example, because it's considered idolatry and Protestantism to do those kinds of things. And so I kind of didn't grow up with any of that. I didn't even grow up celebrating Halloween, to be honest. But it's been interesting connecting with Judaism and then trying to reconnect with my culture and heritage, because trying to honor where I came from, essentially. It's been a journey.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Neil, did you want to add some thoughts?
Yes, certainly the 12 speech acts are a beautiful mapping for individual conduct on very personal relations, but on a larger level, things like thou shalt not kill, clearly Biden supplying the Israelis with munitions and other military apparatus. He has blood up to his elbows in the viciousness towards the Palestinians by supplying these supplies. In a parallel vein, the World Bank and other predatory large banks that give loan shark loans to developing countries that put them in debt slavery, that is clearly stealing.
Right, right. Yeah. So we have to think about what is our responsibility then if our country is engaged in murder and we have a commandment, thou shalt not murder, and it's not, again, these commandments are to individuals, but they're also to how to build a community. So remember, we're still on this liberation journey and we're being given these speech acts about how to build a society, to build a nation that is worthy of the land that we're theoretically going to be given. Now, I would say not necessarily the land itself, but being worthy of having a community of people that are living in right relationship with each other and the planet and other peoples requires certain lessons to be embodied and learned. And that's essentially, let's say, what some of these speech acts represent. How do we build right communities? And so if our community, the United States, or our community as Jews, is engaging in genocidal murder, what is our obligation as citizens of that community or of those communities? What does it mean? I mean, okay, I know I'm not going to murder anybody.
I think one of the things it could mean is that we have to keep the duplicity that Neil addressed in the conversations that we have, and it's not always easy, of course, because they become very hostile. So we have to probably, I would argue, not get hostile and continue to raise the issue of the duplicity involved in, and duplicity and complicity, the complicity of the United States, Empire USA, in the horror that's going on, the terror, the murder in Israel, Palestine by the Israelis, the land grabs on the West Bank that have become more extensive and more intensified, and the duplicity of Bibi's remarks, his office's remarks, when the president Biden argued that we will not give tourist visas, or I guess any kind of visa, to people who are convicted on the West Bank of crimes. But I know, and other people like Arik Asherman and others know, that many are not ever convicted of these crimes. I mean, I myself have put in several police reports of crimes and they go into a black hole because the Israeli police and the Israeli military on the West Bank of the Jordan River, the occupied territory of Israel since 1967, just go into a black hole, that nothing is done. To Asherman's credit and other NGOs' credit that are Palestinian and Israeli in the peace movement that is still alive somewhere underground, those reports then go to other NGOs that continue to build international positions for international courts. But again, that's a very slow process. And this is just the beginning, that we have to continue to talk about these things and bring them forward. But I am guilty of remaining silent when it gets too difficult, or I just lack the gumption, or whatever the word is, to continue to. It's exhausting and heartbreaking.
Yeah,
I don't know what to say. Yeah.
I'm reminded of the prayer that we pray every morning, that we did this morning about we will not be embarrassed to declare the possibility of a world based on love, kindness, generosity, ecological sanity, and evolution of consciousness of all humanity. And I've said this before, but that prayer, which I say every morning, that prayer praise me into action. And what I mean by that is when I'm feeling exhausted or don't want to muster up the courage or the audacity or whatever to speak these truths, I hear that prayer praying me into action and saying, wait a minute, you're talking about not being embarrassed. Well, why are you silencing yourself in this moment? What are you afraid of? What are you embarrassed about? Who are you going to make uncomfortable? What does that mean? And then literally, like, it prays me into speech and into action. And so this reminds me of Heschel, the beautiful Heschel quote that I referred to at the beginning of our services early at 9:30 this morning, which is this. And you spoke about it, Carol, when you're like, if we just could really see all life forms as part of us, as one with us, and we're engaged in a relationship of not itting them, but thouing them, if you will, then we would necessarily engage with the world profoundly differently. And this is how I understand those two quotes. There is the quote of his on one hand that says, we need to be, prayer should uplift us to see the awe and wonder of the universe, like the incredible, miraculous surprise of living itself. And so that's what you were speaking to, kind of, Carol, like, if we looked at the awe of life and wonder itself, this incredible, miraculous thing of living itself, if we honored every day, when all our prayers speak about these things, then we would be in right relationship with the world. And then we would have the courage and audacity to become a revolutionary movement, for our liturgical movement to become the revolutionary movement in the Torah in which it's intended, from which it grows out. So that is how I hold that, Ari. Like, it's a very hard balance, and I don't always manifest it as I'd like, but honestly, I promise you that prayer literally prays me into action. It literally, it's like,
I think we all love you. Amen. I mean, wow. Yeah, that's it.
I want to encourage you to pray it every day, even just that prayer, and see what happens. It's become like a neural pathway in my brain, and I can't not act when it's like on my shoulder going, hey, why are you saying this every day if you're not going to do it? It's like my conscience speaking to myself. So I saw Andre, and then I saw Carol, and then I see Michael. Do you want to go first because you forget? Would you like to jump in?
Well, it's really just
Yeah,
a minor point, but I've been in a lot of movements over the past many decades, and this should not be taken as the only thing one can do, because there are moments in which you are involved in conversation, and which you realize that you're not getting across your full vision. And yes, all the points that you make are totally right, Kat, but also that sometimes it's okay to be strategic in what you say, and how far you go with any person is also a way of moving people that you knew wouldn't be moved by our telling the whole story of our vision when they're so far away from it, but trying to find steps along the way that are consciously taken by you to move people the next step and the next step and the next step. So that's all.
And many of you probably remember me talking about the steps of prophetic empathy that move people from fear to love, and it's paved by stepping stones of prophetic empathy. And so there is empathic engagement, but all of it is engagement. You might find different ways of engaging. Andre.
Well, with reference to the previous point, before Rabbi Lerner gave us his wonderful insight, I was at a training session with a Native American Hopi consultant, and he had pointed out to us that within their tradition, they would not say refer to, using their own language, a horse. They would refer to it as a horse person or a bird person. And by designating it in such a way, it more accurately describes our relationship with nature.
That's gorgeous. Thank you for that. I love that. Carol, yep, please.
Yeah, that relates to what we were discussing. What I brought up in our group was that I've been listening to Braiding Sweetgrass, where she very much talks about all the plants, as you said, as thous or he's or she's. And it really, you ask permission before you harvest, and it's all that you really think about our relate. You would never be strip mining if you were asking permission of the earth, right? For instance. But it's a wonderful book for those of you who haven't read it. It's slow going, but it's wonderful.
It's called Braiding
Sweetgrass, which is a Native American grass. And I've been listening to her read her own book, which is nice for when you're taking walks, for instance, or folding your laundry or whatever.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm sitting with asking the earth for permission to destroy it. Can I
more ideas too? I want our Angela Davis, African American month, and Angela Davis's book. She reads her own words in her book. I'll put the title of the book. It's escaped me into the chat, but she has some Michael Lerner-esque kind of revolutionary love ideas, all of her own, in that book that can help us move the conversation forward, I think, too.
Beautiful. Great. So I'm going to wrap us up here with the following reflections, and then we'll close our Torah study. I just want to remind folks that I brought up, I think it was last week, that was Shabbat 54b in the Talmud, which teaches us that if you are silent in the face of your home engaging in wrongdoing, then you're responsible for the wrongdoing. But it's not only in your home, it's also true for your community and for the world. And so how we use our voices and our bodies and our prayers and our actions and our letters, but the Torah is really clear that if you see wrongdoing happening, the Talmud, you have to speak about it. And then there's a discussion about, well, how many times, how often, what do we have to do? And it says hundreds. You have to keep doing it, even if you think the person's not going to change their way or believe you, because only the divine knows what that person's going to do. We humans, we don't know. So yes, obviously we need to be strategic and use prophetic empathy, stepping stones, and all those things. And also our own discomfort or fear about making someone uncomfortable, we really need to grapple with that and engage with it. Now, if you're not speaking for a strategic reason, that's one thing. If you're not speaking because you're embarrassed or fearful, that seems to me to be something else. And so I wish for all of us a path where we find our voice, find our ways of engaging in the world, and to speak our deepest truths with as much courage as we can muster, with the support of our ancestors behind us and our peoples behind us, and with the courage in our convictions, so that we can be agents of change to build a more loving and just world, and in this moment to stop an unfolding or already created genocide that's spreading to larger wars in the Middle East. So may we all find pray with our feet and with our voices and with our bodies to help bring forth a more loving and just world. Thank you.
Amen. Amen. Amen.
And now we will close. Ami, you want to pick it up? Thank you.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet וחיי עולם נטע בתוכנו, ברוך אתה היה נותן התורה.
Amen.